Today we are going to study Chapter 2 Vesuvius Comes Alive by Karen Ball. The story which we are going to read is about a volcanic eruption in the past time. In AD 79, the volcano Mount Vesuvius in Italy erupted. The city of Pompeii, which was near the volcano, was destroyed and completely buried under 60 feet of ash and lava. This city was then lost for nearly 1700 years before it was found again by chance in 1748. The excavation tells us what life was like in the ancient Roman city. The happenings are told by an old man in Pompeii. Only he realized that day that the smoke arising from Vesuvius was a sign of danger. This chapter describes the last few hours of life before the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in AD 79 in the city of Pompeii, which is located in Italy. It was one of the deadliest eruptions in European history, and because of this, the city was lost for almost 1700 years. 24 August AD 79. The morning began very hot. Hotter than a normal August day. But Pompeii's market traders did not notice this and began to set up their stalls in the forum. A few curious citizens watched from under the shade of a leafy tree. A wealthy woman went past on a chair that was carried by 4 attendants. Traders prepared themselves for a day of good business and laid out all their wares. A shoemaker spread out his tools. Fabric, pottery, wool, bread, and honey were all arranged on carts for sale. So the date of the eruption is mentioned here, which is 24 August AD 79. The narrator describes the marketplace of Pompeii. He says that this day was much hotter compared to any other normal August days. But no one noticed, and the traders, means the seller of goods, began to arrange their stalls in the forum. That means in a large area in a town for business. Some people were watching from under the shade of a leafy tree, and there was also a rich woman being carried by 4 attendants because at that time there were no vehicles. There were different traders, shoemakers who laid their wares, that is the things for selling on the streets. The sellers looked anxiously for buyers. They would soon be there. No one noticed that the sun looked unusually hazy in the sky. By 10 o'clock, the market was busy and full of noise. Traders called out their wares and people wandered from stall to stall buying, asking for prices and talking. Here a busy marketplace is described. All of the peoples were waiting for the customers to purchase their goods, and by 10 o'clock the entire place was almost full of noise as the traders were shouting their wares. That means they were calling out their wares in order to advertise it for buyers to come and purchase. We can see it in the marketplaces. The vendors, the vegetable sellers know how they shout for prices and items. And people were very busy moving from stall to another, and they were trying to inquire for the prices and were also having talks. In the far corner of the square, an old man with a stoop busily added his own note to Pompeii's local notice board, a city wall. There were no telephones or post then, and this was how people in Pompeii left messages for each other. The man did not like the messages on the wall. He decided to let the others know that, "Oh wall, I can't believe you haven't fallen under the weight of all these boring messages." This notice board of Pompeii was not like our school notice boards, but it was a city wall where people used to write messages for each other, as at that time there were no post offices or telephones. But the old man did not like this, and therefore he writes this message given in your book. "Oh wall, I can't believe you haven't fallen under the weight of all these boring messages." It means he was able to feel the pain of the wall, which is a non-living thing which cannot speak but has the feelings. He writes that, "Oh wall, How could you survive so long without falling down? He felt pleased now and turned away. Suddenly, his chisel slipped and fell to the ground with a clatter. He was looking towards the horizon in horror and raised a limp finger to point at what he saw before him. Someone brushed past him, but he did not move. He stood frozen with fear. In this paragraph, the fear of the old man is described. After writing the message, the old man was happy. Then suddenly, his chisel, that is the metal tool that he used to write on the wall, fell down, thus making a very loud sound. And when he looked towards the horizon, he saw something and tried to show it to everyone present there, but no one noticed that. Instead, someone pushed him slowly, but he did not move, as he was stuck in one place with fear. It was a long time before he moved. Then he turned to the people. "Look, the volcano is stirring," he shouted. Passers-by looked back over their shoulders to see what he was pointing at. Gasps and nervous laughs filled the air. But no one listened. They just shook their heads and turned their backs. They smiled to themselves and thought, "The gods are angry again," and they went back to whatever they were doing. So after a long time, when he moved, he started shouting at the volcano that it was rising up. Though the people turned towards to see what the old man was pointing at, but they did not bother about it and thought that the gods were angry again. In ancient times, it was believed that the natural disasters, means the volcanoes, floods, earthquakes, all happened because of the anger of gods. "Why aren't they listening to me?" thought the man worriedly. Then he knew why. The people of Pompeii were used to Vesuvius rumbling and spewing out smoke now and then. Only he seemed to remember the earthquake of a few months ago. He realized that the two events were somehow connected. The old man was worried when he saw that no one was listening to him. But then he realized that the people of Pompeii were used to this kind of volcanoes and earthquakes. And then he realized about the earthquake that took place few months ago and felt that both the events were somehow connected to each other. For a while he stood watching the thin column of smoke which came out of the top of Mount Vesuvius. Then suddenly he turned and ran fearfully towards his house. As he ran, a flake of ash fell on his tunic, as gently as a flake of snow. He brushed it away. It left a dark smear on the pale linen. For some time, the old man kept on watching the smoke that came out of Mount Vesuvius, and then he ran fearfully towards his house. Then suddenly, a flake of ash, that is the black powder which is left after something is burnt, fell on his clothes and it left a dirty mark on it. When he reached home at last, he found his wife sitting next to the fountain in their garden. He pulled her roughly to her feet. "Leave," he said. "We must leave now. Get everything you can and let's run." When he reached back home, he saw his wife sitting in the garden next to a fountain. The old man tried to pull her as fast as he could and asked her to leave the place. He also told her to collect all the important things which she can from the house and run away. "But where?" she asked him in surprise. "Away from that," he shouted. She followed his finger. He was pointing at Mount Vesuvius far behind them. His wife was unaware of the volcano and thus questioned where to run and why. Then the old man pointed at the mountain Vesuvius. An hour later, they hurried down the street towards one of the city gates. From one of the doorways, a woman called to her children to come in. "We are taking shelter," she told the old man and woman as they passed by. "With luck, we will be safe in the house." After an hour, they reached the city gate. There they met a woman with her child who was trying to take shelter there in order to rescue themselves from the volcano. "No, you won't be. No, you won't. Leave, leave with us," shouted the old man. "He always predicts terrible happenings," people thought. This is one of them. And no one except his wife believed they would come true. The old man told the lady that no, she and her child won't be safe there, and thus they should leave the place along with them. People thought that this old man could predict any event or actions happening in the future, but this time no one trusted him except his wife. But the others were wrong. As the hours went by, the column of smoke which streamed out of the volcano grew stronger and larger. Then Vesuvius began to explode. Pumic stones rained down, the sky turned dark, and the earth shook. Everyone proved to be wrong this time, because after a few hours the column of smoke which was emerging out of the volcano grew much stronger, and thus it was time for the end, because the Vesuvius started exploding now, and the volcanic rocks started pouring down like raindrops. The sky was completely dark, and the earth on the other hand started shaking. But the people of Pompeii were used to quakes and tremors. All they did was go indoors, as they always did when Vesuvius rumbled. They did not know then that they and their city would soon be buried under 60 feet of ash and mud. But the people still did not take any notice, because they thought it to be unlike any other slight quakes or trembles which always happened, and thus they went indoors. But everything ended up. They, along with their entire town, was buried down under 60 feet of ash and mud, and thus the entire city was lost for 1700 years.